Part 3. The Final Lynch Pin. It was 1981, and Dune had now been in development hell for a year short of a decade. The 9-year option was up for Dune, and despite the previous setbacks, Dino De Laurentiis renegotiated, getting the film rights for Dune and future sequels. Now, however, it was back to square one with no director. Then Dino De Laurentiis saw the film The Elephant Man with his daughter, and they were impressed by the film along with its director, David Lynch. David Lynch was then brought on board as the new director for another attempt to get Dune off the ground. With David Lynch on board, pre-production would begin in May of 1981 at Universal Studios. David Lynch would team up with Eric Bergen and Christopher DeVore, both of whom he had previously worked with on The Elephant Man, shown here with producer Mel Brooks on the set of The Elephant Man. The team came up with 2 scripts, with the first script ending at the point in the story where Paul and his mother are brought to the desert to be left for dead. However, after some creative differences, Bergen and DeVore left the project. David Lynch then went on it alone, writing the script. Including the first 2 scripts with Eric Bergen and Christopher DeVore, David Lynch would write a total of 7 drafts for the film script, with the final draft being used while the making of the film was well underway. For the film's lead, Paul Atreides, actor Kyle MacLachlan would be cast. Kyle MacLachlan was born in Yakima, Washington, USA, on February 22, 1959. He was 24 years old when he played the role of Paul Atreides. Dune was also his first major film role. Other cast members would include Francesca Annis as Lady Jessica, Jurgen Prochnow as Duke Leto, Richard Jordan as Duncan Idaho, Everett McGill as Stilgar, Kenneth McMillan as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Brad Dourif as Piter de Vries, Jose Ferrer as the Padishar Emperor, Dean Stockwell as Dr. Yue, Sean Young as Chani, and Virginia Madison as Princess Irulan. Also, who could forget rock star Sting as Fade Ryutha, along with Patrick Stewart as Gurney Halleck in one of his pre-Star Trek TNG roles. Principal photography on Dune began in Mexico on March 1983, and the film wrapped shooting on January 1984. While Dune was being made, Frank Herbert's wife, Beverly, would pass away on February 7, 1984, after a decade-long battle with cancer. If the idea of finally getting a big screen adaptation of Dune wasn't enough for Dune fans, Frank Herbert would publish his 5th Dune novel, Heretics of Dune, on April of 1984. With a new Dune novel to read and a new film only a few months away, this period would have been an exciting time to have been a Dune fan. Finally, after 12 years of development hell, on December 14, 1984, Dune was released in theaters. Along with the new film would be merchandise to tie in to the new film. With the huge success of the Star Wars toy line by Kenner, every toy company was looking for the next Star Wars thing. Dune was no exception, with LJN producing an action figure line to tie in with the new Universal film. With the toys, the film was put into storybook form, like what had been done with the Star Wars films. The film was beautifully adapted by Marvel Comics, with incredible artwork by Bill Sienkiewicz. There was also coloring activity books released to tie in with the new film. Parker Brothers would release a new Dune board game based on the film. Viewmaster even got in on the action with the release of this Dune gift set. Along with all that, a staple of years gone by was trading cards of the film. These were always packed in wax paper and a stick of gum. Unfortunately, David Lynch's Dune would turn out to be a failure at the box office. With a budget of $40 million, it didn't even manage to make back its production budget, pulling in just under $40 million only, and any chance of future sequels died right then and there. With a few exceptions, the critics were none kinder to the film than the box office. Roger Ebert gave a lengthy review of the film that panned the movie, saying in that review of Dune, "It took Dune about 9 minutes to completely strip me of my anticipation. This movie is a real mess, an incomprehensible, ugly, unstructured, pointless excursion into the murkier realms of one of the most confusing screenplays of all time. Robin Wood, a Canadian professor and film critic, Wood criticized the film for being homophobic in his 1986 book, Hollywood from Vietnam to Reagan and Beyond. The most obscenely homophobic film I have ever seen, managing to associate with homosexuality in a single scene, physical grossness, moral depravity, violence, and disease. Harlan Ellison was one of the few critics that gave Dune a positive review, and gave his opinion as to why the film failed in his book Harlan Ellison's Watching. It was widely rumored in the gossip underground that Frank Price, chairman of MCA, Universal's motion picture group, and one of the most powerful men in the industry, had screened the film in one or another of its final workups, and had declared, vehemently enough and publicly enough, for the words quickly to have seeped under the door of the viewing room and formed a masmia over the entire Universal lot. This film is a dog. It's gonna drop dead. We're gonna take a bath on it. Nobody'll understand it. This vibe apparently swept through people at Universal, and the studio got cold feet regarding the film, with Universal canceling screenings or rescheduling them. Decades later, on the Dune Special Edition DVD special features, Harlan Ellison would still stand by his praise of Dune. This film still holds up, and when you go back and you look at it, you are drawn into it. Currently, Dune sits at 6.5 stars on IMDb. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a critic score of 53% and an audience score of 66%. After the failure of this film, there was some fallout that came to light over the years with David Lynch, as he felt he had sold out. He took on the project knowing that he didn't have final cut of the film. Dune, I didn't have final cut on. It's the only film I've made where I didn't have. I didn't technically have final cut on The Elephant Man, but Mel Brooks gave it to me, and on Dune the film, I started selling out, even in the script phase, knowing I didn't have final cut, and I sold out. So it was a slow dying, the death and terrible, terrible experience. I don't know how it happened. I trusted it would work out, but it was very naive and the wrong move. In those days, the maximum length they figured I could have is 2 hours and 17 minutes, and that's what the film is, so they wouldn't lose a screening a day. So once again, it's money talking, and not for the film at all. And so it was like compacted, and it hurt it. It hurt it. There is no other version. There's more stuff, but even that is putrefied. In retrospect, David Lynch acknowledged he should never have directed this movie. I started selling out on Dune. Looking back, it's no one's fault but my own. I probably shouldn't have done that picture, but I saw tons and tons of possibilities for things I loved, and this was the structure to do them in. There was so much room to create a world, but I got strong indications from Raffaella and Dino De Laurentiis what kind of film they expected, and I knew I didn't have final cut. David Lynch since has completely disowned the film, with director cuts being released on DVD, which Lynch has refused all invitations to recut the film, and even having his name removed from the credits, replacing them with Alan Smithee, and refusing to discuss the film in interviews. I wonder if David Lynch had not lost control of the film and the studio had faith to back the film, would it have fared better at the box office, and would we have gotten a trilogy of Dune films in the 80s? Over the decades, David Lynch's Dune has become a cult classic to science fiction fans. I personally love this film, as it was my gateway drug to the books. Without this film, I would not be a Dune fan today. Thank you to all of my subscribers, and thank you for watching this video. And if you're new to the channel, like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to hit the bell icon for notification when new videos are uploaded.